We've all seen the headlines, a confrontation between a police officer and a civilian that ends in tragedy and often community outrage. Each incident widens the divide between police officers and the communities they serve. This year, John Jay College launched a year-long initiative aimed at bridging that divide. The intriguing subtitle was Reimagining Police-Community Relations. The initiative has produced new insights and understanding, and most importantly, created a more collaborative channel of communications on the part of New Yorkers and the police. In today's special episode of Criminal Justice Matters, we offer a taste of what those conversations have been like. In the first segment, we feature Dr. Lenora Fulani, founder of New York's justly acclaimed All Stars Project. Dr. Fulani uses participatory theater to show how cops and kids can bridge the divide with humor and empathy. In the second segment, students and faculty at John Jay were asked to respond to the question, what is justice? I think you'll find their answers compelling. Let's listen in.
Angry mobs ran through Crown Heights. Rocks and bottles were thrown, shots fired. It all happened after a car driven by a Hasidic Jew jumped a curb. A 7-year-old black girl on a bicycle was killed. Her 7-year-old cousin seriously injured.
The Hasidic community says that as revenge for the accident which killed the young boy, a Hasidic man, a Jewish man, was stabbed to death 2 hours later. They say it was revenge, but of course there are no hard and true facts here. There is just tension, there is just passion. And you can see behind me the police at the 71st Precinct clearly mobilizing at this hour.
I went out into the community the following day to be with the community in its upsetness. And on the streets outside of the Cato home were about 150 police officers lined up in riot gear. At some point, I realized that the young black men, teenagers, were picking up rocks and stones and bottles and lining up preparing to rush the police. I called Dr. Newman, sharing with him my concern about what the kids were about to do. He suggested that I go out and speak to some of the women on the streets and ask them to join me in intervening on this situation. I did, and people said to me, Dr. Fulani, I respect you, but I'm not about to get in the midst of that battle. I then, at some point, with the two people who were there as my security, went into the streets and for 4 hours, using some combination of mother wit and cursing and yelling, got the kids to back down. And one of the things that stayed with me was that in response to my saying to the kids that they were going to get slaughtered, they kept shouting at me that they had nothing to live for. Their responses broke my heart, and when they finally dispersed, I vowed to myself that I would continue to strengthen my work with them at the All-Stars. It also turned out that many of the officers, some who had been promoted to higher office, were out on the streets that day. So when I began running the program, Operation Conversation Cops and Kids, they would come up to me and thank me for preventing what would have been a street riot and applauded the work that I was doing with the cops and kids.
Dr. Fulani, welcome.
Hi, it's so great to be here again with you.
It's great to have you. So, performance, what does that have to do with justice?
Well, I mean, basically, even though we don't think about it in this way, people, all kinds of people, we perform our lives. We learn how to approach things, we have various responses, and it's not as if they're innate. And so at the All Stars Project, which I helped to co-found 30 some odd years ago, we understand that performance allows for human beings to do things that they normally don't know how to do, to take risks, to basically step outside of whatever their personality is or what they think their personality is and do all kinds of creative things in the world. And it's how babies develop. It's not like babies have all of these thoughts about, I'm going to walk, I'm going to crawl, I'm going to play with my toys. They do new things, and in the process of doing that, they grow and expand.
So you have kids coming together with cops, basically, and they're playing their roles, real life roles in a way. How does that actually work?
Basically, I create an opportunity at some point early in the process of doing these workshops where the young people and the police officers do skits together. Curtain up.
Kids, what kind of pets do you want?
I want a tiger.
Tiger, I don't know about that.
Tiger, this is a small, it's
A
one
white one too.
one bathroom, one kitchen. I don't think we have the
Who's
space
cleaning
for a
up?
Tiger
tiger.
can sleep in your bedroom.
I have a big backyard.
Could escape, I don't know.
Yeah.
Alligator. I want an alligator.
Alligator, we have a big pool back there, so we could just
I
throw
think
it
we're
in
gonna
there.
need a moat, as I said. The rent's already too high. One
Alligator's cool
bathroom,
too.
Is no one concerned about injuries from wild animals? No?
Our family lives on the edge, so we're
Yeah, yeah. Alligator, tiger.
White one.
Oh, okay.
Tony the Tiger. That's
not a-
actually, that's pretty cool.
I'm
I
not a
like
fan.
it. Let's do it.
I'm not a fan of Frosted Flakes. What do you want?
How about a dog?
They have this ridiculous and absurd conversation and they perform and together. And in the process, one of the things that it does is it humanizes one to the other, because the young people don't think that cops have a sense of humor. They have all these ideas about who they are and what they can do. And so when they see the police officers sort of falling over themselves in laughter and literally being silly, they sort of love it. And we do that before we do the conversation part of the workshop, because it creates an environment where people are able to hear each other and also to think new thoughts and ask creative questions.
And what is it they hear,
Well,
do you think?
in the course of the conversation, two of the questions that make a really big difference is, first of all, I ask the kids to say, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to them in their lives?
The worst thing that's ever happened to me, I'd have to say watching my grandfather get pulled out of the car and arrested for no reason. He came home and there was no reason. It was just, he fit the description.
I want you to repeat the story that you just shared with us. And officer, I want you to empathize with what you just said.
My father passed away when I was 6 years old of a heroin overdose. I found out the day my mom found him. I was at a friend's house and I was staying over, and she just told me, Dad passed away.
I'm sorry to hear that. I know you're going through high school. I lost one of my best friends for heroin overdose as well. It was probably one of the saddest days of my life. I'm sorry.
Shake hands.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our kids live in poor communities. They live in poverty, and every 5 minutes something goes wrong. So the kids talk about the deaths of people that are close to them. They talk about the incarceration of their fathers, sometimes their mothers. They talk about not having food and a variety of other kinds of things that even
Can
though...
the cops relate to that?
Well, yes. I mean, first of all, I think that some of the cops have come out of poverty and at least working class homes. But I think they don't necessarily think about that when they're patrolling the communities, even the cops who have grown up in the poor communities. So it actually penetrates. The kids have unbelievable stories. And then the cops, on the other hand, when I ask them what's the hardest thing about being a cop, they talk about not being home with their families. They talk about being criticized by their families because they've become cops. They miss holidays. And because kids are kids, I think one of the things that really impacts them is when a cop says, I haven't been home for Christmas in 9 years. So then that creates...
That's interesting.
Yeah, it creates the possibility to go new places and have new conversations.
But this is in a protected environment, a theater setting. How does it translate when they get back out into the streets?
Well, it's actually, a lot of it happens at the PAL Center, or it happens at my center on 42nd Street, or it happens in a school. It happens in the communities for the most part. And it's not so far from reality. I mean, when the cops walk in, the kids have, they have their response to that, and the cops have their response to the kids.
Because they're in uniform, right? The cops
yes,
come
and
in uniform.
they're armed, they're cops.
They
and
come with guns as well.
Yes, they come as cops. And I have them sit in a circle, cop, kid, so they can't really avoid each other. The kids are sitting next to them. And I think it's an experience that, I know it is, that neither of them has ever really had before, and conversations that they've never had before. And the reports that I get from both the young people and the police officers is that when they're back out on the streets, they take some of what they've learned and done in the workshop with them. So, for example,
do they see the same officers, or will they see the same officer on the street when they go home, and
sometimes
then change their attitude towards them?
Sometimes, yes, because the officers come from a nearby precinct.
So what happens when they see each other out on the streets?
I think they've learned that they can do a different kind of performance. I think it also impacts upon the familiarity of one to the other, because it's a very intimate setting. It's a kind of setting that they've never been in. And I get reports from the kids and the cops of how they've done something different together, and even with strangers. I mean, one of the things that police officers oftentimes complain about is that when they're in the communities and a parent and their kid walks by and they say hello, nobody ever says hello back. So then they stop saying hello.
And now, does it change? Does it actually
Well, what
change?
changes is that they don't take it so personally, and I told them to keep saying hello, and at some point people will say hello. But if you get, an attitude because people won't speak to you, then that has an impact on whether or not they will ever speak to you. And also, that's not the biggest thing that's going on.
There's so much baggage right now in the relationship between cops and the community that, we just have to look at the headlines to understand what's been happening around the country. Hard to imagine that just getting them together and learning how to say hello to each other is enough to overcome this baggage, which some people actually would argue goes back centuries.
Well, as an African American, I surely wouldn't argue against that. But I think the thing that the workshop helps the cops and kids look at is that what really is a problem in poor communities of color, and probably also in white poor communities, but we don't hear that much about this there, is poverty. A lot of what police officers are assigned to do is to navigate all the many things in our communities that don't go well. The school system is dysfunctional. I work with kids who take Regents exams in chemistry and they've never seen a science book. There's a listing of the 100 worst high schools in the city. The schools don't work. And that's not a cop problem, that's a political problem, that's a politician's problem, that's an educator's problem. And unless we do something about that, that's a big deal.
And it's a larger problem really than when we think about justice. We think about criminal justice, cops and kids in the street, officer-involved shootings, but you're really talking about a much larger concept of what justice is.
Absolutely, and it shapes the overall environment in huge ways. I have kids who come to my workshops, various places, to the All-Stars, and say to me, Dr. Fulani, I didn't eat for the last few days because we only had enough food for my little sister and I wanted her to eat. So that's it's extremely upsetting. And also if you're walking around and you're not eating, that has an impact. A lot of the kids don't even know what they're angry about. I work with kids who've been in gangs, who walk out on the streets and they are so pissed off, but they don't even know what it is. And what it really comes down to is, in my opinion, an abandonment of poor people in this country. And then we send the police officers in to manage all of that. And you need a social worker and jobs in order to manage all of that.
Some cops would argue the same. In fact, do you think we can ever get past this? Are you optimistic that we can get to the next stage where people can actually understand some of the roots of these justice issues?
Well, yes, and some of it has to do, I think, with engaging the political establishment, and they're functioning more as leaders in our community and working with the community in better ways. I think it's a political issue.
And you've been a politician yourself in your earlier days.
Well, I think of myself
Are
not
you
as
hopeful?
a politician, but as a leader. I'm a political leader, I'm a psychologist, I'm many things, and I grew up poor. I watched, I had 12 nieces and nephews, 6 of them are dead. My father died, when I was 12 because an ambulance service refused to come into the poor black community to take him to the hospital. So I have experiences like many ordinary other Black and Latino and poor white people in this country that really have a tremendous emotional impact. So in order for the street to change, I think the country has to go through a very critical and important change relative to how it relates to poor people overall and how it relates to the Black community. We still have not been integrated into American society. That's a big, 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 big deal.
Dr. Fulani, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're deeply welcomed.
No one pretends that just discussing these difficult issues will produce the kind of change in policy and approach that many New York communities want to see. As community advocates and the students themselves would say, we need a lot more than talk. But the past year shows what can happen when both sides really sit down and try to put their preconceived notions aside. Please visit John Jay's Bridging the Divide website and check out videos from our events throughout the year. Tell us what you think. I'm Steve Handelman. Thanks for watching. See you next time.